Trigger warning for discussions of suicide, mental health, and traumatic events. Welcome to Friends at Film Camp, the podcast where two friends gab by the fire about our fun film perspectives. I'm Jinian.
And I'm Luke.
Today we're discussing The Woman in the Window.
The Woman in the Window is a 2021 film released on Netflix. The film is directed by Joe Wright and stars Amy Adams as a woman who is trapped inside her own house following her agoraphobia and the mystery that unfolds with her mysterious new neighbors.
What else has Joe Wright directed? I recognize the name.
Joe Wright, according to his Wikipedia page, the most reliable source for news, he's directed Pride and Prejudice, Atonement, Anna Karenina, Pan. Do you remember Pan? That really racist...
Yes, I do. I didn't know he directed that.
Yeah. And The Darkest Hour, which won co-star in this film, the Gary Oldman, his acting Oscar.
That explains why I really like the cinematography.
Because you like the cinematography in The Darkest Hour?
No, but in Pride and Prejudice and... I don't know. I've seen other movies of his too. I think I just like his cinematography.
Okay.
He really cares about the visual experience, which I appreciate. Because personally, if a film is pretty enough, I can experience it as just a visual experience and get a lot of enjoyment out of the film, even if I don't like the plot. Like Stoker, I watched Stoker on an airplane after wanting to see it for a really long time, and to this day I hate the plot. I don't like anything that happens, but every shot of the film was so gorgeous, I still really enjoyed it and I would watch it again.
I think I feel very similar in that regard about if a film's pretty enough, I can ignore more flaws.
Yeah.
It's how I feel about a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies when I don't care for his plot.
Yeah.
But he has such nice visuals. He treats every frame like a picture that you could frame on a wall, that it helps with that.
But I thought you didn't like the aesthetic choice for this film.
I did not like the aesthetic choice for this film. So before we begin to talk about the plot, I think we should have our spoiler warning now.
Yeah, that's
We're going to be
idea.
spoiling the entire film and the many twists and mysteries that unfold. So, you have been warned. So, what did you think of the film in general?
Okay, so I was really intrigued by the trailers, and I had heard that it had bad reviews, but for some reason I was still expecting to like it. I don't know why. Maybe I just thought I was going to be like a contrarian. And honestly, I did like it about like up to 3/4 of the way through. As soon as the thing with mysteries is you really gotta nail the mystery. And I liked the build up to the mystery, and I hated the resolution. And like everything, there's sort of little mysteries building up to the main one, but I had guessed all of those honestly within the first scene of the movie, which doesn't necessarily mean I don't mind being able to guess where a movie is going as long as I enjoy the story still. With the stuff with her husband and stuff. Like, I immediately guessed that she wasn't actually talking to him on the phone. And that was true. I didn't mind that because it made sense with the story. But in having none of those be a surprise and then having the actual, like, big mystery letdown also be a letdown, it kind of ruined the film for me.
Yeah, I would agree with your sentiment that if you're going to tell a mystery in a film, you need it to be a good mystery.
Yeah.
And this was not that.
Yeah.
But the movie kind of thought it was doing that.
That's
as in they kept doing, a lot of, hey, it could be this person, it could be this person, but it was the first person you thought it was.
Yeah.
And they were like, it had a lot of issues getting there.
I had said earlier that I feel like this is one of those films that is trying to be Gone Girl. Like Woman on the Train. It's the most obvious one I can think of that came out shortly after Gone Girl. And you really disagreed. But this is what I mean in that I feel like Gone Girl is... One, the mood is very similar, at least to me, in that it's like a moody, almost like sensual mystery, if that makes sense. But in Gone Girl, similarly to this movie in the build-up, is very obvious. It's very obvious that something is not as it seems, or else what would be the point of the movie, if that makes sense. Like, you know that there's going to be a twist, and it doesn't even try that hard to hide the twist. It's very easily guessable, but the execution of it is so good and so satisfying that it's still a very like, it's like a very satisfying narrative, which is what I find that like these movies that are kind of trying to be the next Gone Girl fail at, in that they don't have the script as tight as it needs to be, and they just kind of focus on like the aura and the feeling of the mystery rather than like the actual story. But you disagreed with me, so I want to know why you don't think it's like Gone Girl.
I don't think it's like Gone Girl, because Gone Girl, as you said, it was almost such a non-mystery that it really, I wouldn't describe Gone Girl as a mystery film.
Really?
I would describe something close to like The Woman on the Train.
Yeah.
Which, although I've never seen it, the trailers seem to be very similar. In that it's like a female who might have saw something, but we don't really know, and they're probably an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
So I see that connection. But this is more Hitchcockian mystery than Gone Girl mystery.
I see it, I don't know. I see it so much as like, almost like I compare it to when Twilight came out and we had all those young adult movies that were like adventurous and like you had to save the world and you were like some brunette girl and stuff. I see it as sort of like a continuation of that, where it's like, it's not like the plot is exactly the same, but they're kind of trying to piggyback off of the hype and excitement that Gone Girl got. Does that make sense? Rather than like an exact like comparison. That's how I see it.
I get what you mean, but I don't see that connection at all.
That's insane to me, because it's like all I can see when I watch this movie.
Okay.
But okay, we can get into the plot. So, okay, the movie opens
with child psychologist Anna Fox, played by Amy Adams, in her apartment, or her house really, in New York City.
Well, I think it opens with a shot of the snow, doesn't it?
The snow, but I think it looks like stars, but...
Yes, but we keep flashing back to that. So that's one of the, like, mini mysteries where we keep flashing. I think we see that every time she goes to sleep. It's, like, snow, and then she wakes up. So that's very obvious, like, cinematic language of, like, some traumatic event that's going to be brought up. Like, it's very unsubtle. Not that it needs to be, because I was satisfied with the reveal of her family being dead, even though it was very obvious. How did you feel about that?
The way that the film talks about the family, I will say it's a little on the nose.
Heavy-handed?
No, not heavy-handed. It's just a little poignant, where it's like, yeah, her family's dead. And it's just very like, yep, that's how it is.
It was a little intense with the reveal, with the cop in the background who kept being like, your family's dead. Your family's dead. Like, that was a little intense. Which I did find, even though I was on board for this movie through most of it, there were quite a few scenes that were supposed to be very intense that kind of went over the line into funny.
And I go back to that's the issue of the script. The script, like, was not very tight or well written before they filmed, and then they kept trying to like edit it and frame poorly written lines.
Yeah.
In such a way where it's like, haha, now this is serious. It's
Yeah.
like, well,
It did feel like they were trying to figure it out as they go, which I feel like does not work at all with like a mystery. Like you really need to, how the classic like writing tip of like know the mystery, like know the end of the mystery and then put clues in throughout. Like you really can't figure it out as you go with a mystery. You have to like know what the end is, or the end reveal is like not satisfying, which I feel like is exactly what this movie did.
mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Amy Adams.
Yeah.
Especially at the starting half.
Mhm.
I think Amy Adams can make even reading a phone book interesting, because
Yeah.
she's a good actress.
She is.
So I think she's doing a good job with a bad script.
I agree. She did really good. I actually felt most of the actors in this felt like a film with very high expectations, which I feel like you can see with just the caliber of actors they have. They have a lot of really well-known actors. And I didn't feel like anyone was half-assing it. Like, I felt like people were expecting this to be a very good movie.
This looked like something they thought was going to be an Oscar film.
Exactly. So, like, I feel like everyone was giving it their all. It was really, I think, the script that was the letdown. Like, it had the elements that it needed to be really good, but the script, yeah, it just felt very messy. But yeah, I think Amy Adams did great, and I also really liked how they styled her, in that she rarely looked glamorous. It didn't look like she was wearing a lot of makeup. She was probably wearing some makeup, probably even makeup to make her look worse. And I really like that. It's so rare. It's getting a little less rare, but it's still relatively rare to see a film not be afraid to have a woman like not look her best, like look kind of depressed, look kind of like she's taking pills and drinking at the same time, and she's a bit fucking out of it. Like, it's, so I appreciated the aspects of realism that they went into with her look.
Mm-hmm. I think Amy Adams does a great job with the role. With the role as it is. I don't think there's really a better way to do this role with how it's written.
Yeah.
There was a few times where I thought it was a little questionable in the direction she was going in. Most specifically, the scene where she sees the murder and she kind of freaks out, but in a way which felt very contrived, and because the plot needed her to act this way, and not how the character would act. So
I would argue, I think that would be on the director.
Yes, I was just about to say that I blame any issues with performances on not having a team looking out for the actors rather than the actors themselves being the issue. And this director is an Oscar director for acting, particularly with The Darkest Hour and I believe Pride and Prejudice as well.
Yeah.
So I think he's good at getting a good performance from people.
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
It's really like the script was really fighting everyone to make this a good movie. Like, everyone was actively fighting against the script to trying with all their might to make it good. But you can't make a bad script good.
So I think there's two scenes we should talk about that are very important to the film's plot, and that's when Amy Adams' character meets the son of the Russell family and Jane Russell. So first, let's talk about the son meeting.
Okay.
And the second I saw the son, I wrote down in my notes, weird neighbor, bracket, but not fun.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this guy is being super suspicious and like kind of manipulative and very forward. And I'm like, okay, he's suspicious.
Yeah.
And which ruins the mystery.
Yes.
Final spoiler warning, he's the guy who kills the people.
I also wrote that down. I think in their first meeting I wrote down creepy. Like, so they reveal at the end of the movie that the son has been killing people, basically, and he's like a budding serial killer. But it's extremely unsatisfying. First of all, he's very creepy in the first meeting, which is weird, and they don't do that much to make you feel like that was a bad first impression, if that makes sense. Like, Amy Adams becomes really close to him basically with just them telling us that she does. Like, she just kind of decides that she cares about him all of a sudden, but we don't see him really evolve that much or, like, do anything to make us... Anyway, so he's really creepy from the get-go, and then they don't build that relationship enough for it to feel like a big deal. It's almost like it was the garbage man or something who we met a few times, and, like, it turns out he was the murderer, you know? It's like he was not consequential enough as a character for it to be like, oh no, he's the one?
We only had, like, a few interactions with him.
Yeah.
Before we find out this supposed plot twist. And I was like, he was weird every time.
Yeah. They made him significantly old. They made him, like, a teenager. He's 15, I think the dad says. But he looks like an adult. I'm sure he's played by an adult.
It's played by a 20-something-year-old.
Exactly. And, but, like, in cinema at this point, we've seen enough teenage murderers that it's not like you see a teenager and you're like, they could never have done it, if that makes sense. Which I feel like the movie was banking on us being like, obviously he's not involved in anything, which I feel like he's too old in what we've established in, like, cinematic expectation. But, like, since he's 15, played by a 20-something-year-old, he's never out of the list of suspects just because he's 15.
Yeah.
At least he wasn't for me.
He looks like an adult that could go to, like, college or something. So him being a crazy murderer person,
yeah,
is just not a big twist.
Yeah.
In the way that they seem to think it is, because he's not young enough that that's surprising.
Yeah, it's like we never have enough of an impression with him. For the twist of him being the villain to work, him and Amy Adams needed to have a much stronger relationship that we built up through the film. And even with the characterization they gave him at the end, they could have easily done that in a way that would have been very effective. But because he was so inconsequential, he just wasn't a good villain.
Yeah. And we would never have been able to figure that out really on our own. Like, the film never gives you a chance to, like, this person could be it. It's their first meeting. You think he's creepy.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the film, they're like, well, obviously can't be him. And I'm like, oh, the film just told me it can't be him. Not in a, maybe it's him, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
It just ignores him.
Yeah, it doesn't really give you, like, a list of people it could be. It's only the husband.
And the downstairs neighbor.
True, yeah, but I never thought it was him.
I never thought it was him. That was a big waste of time.
Also, I feel really bad for the neighbor because I feel like he gets the short end of the stick, and then he, spoiler, dies at the end. Again, inconsequentially. And it's, like, not really ever brought up again. And, like, that guy was a whole human being. Like, he had a family, he was doing stuff, and we're, like, not really meant to feel bad that he died in any significant way.
I disagree, but let's talk about that more when we get to the climax.
Okay.
Let's talk more about the meeting with the fake Jane Russell.
Mm-hmm.
Played by Julianne Moore. This was, in terms of plot, the most important scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And the dialogue was so awkward and so stagnant and awful in the scene that the second I saw this scene, I was noticing Julianne Moore is not answering anything that Amy Adams says.
Yeah, but I think that was supposed to be on purpose.
Yes, that's supposed to be like, oh, when we look back, we see that she never did this. But the second I'm watching it, I'm like, well, Julianne Moore's not saying anything here.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was really obvious that this person was not who we said we were, because she's not addressing any of this information. When she asks for her name, Amy Adams gives her name.
Yeah.
And it's just very awkwardly formatted, where Julianne Moore's not lying, but she's not telling the truth, and she's just kind of being weird about it. And I hated that scene.
I didn't. I liked it.
I hated it.
But I think every problem you have with it was on purpose. Like,
I
it
know
was
it was on
supposed to
purpose,
be
but
really
it was
weird.
poorly done.
Why do you think it was poorly done?
Because it was so obvious that the second I saw the scene, I'm like, Julianne Moore is a big liar. She is not this character. Or she's being very weirdly misleading because she's not answering anything that Amy Adams asked. She's not telling her anything.
Well, we're supposed to know she's being secretive.
But we don't know that she's being secretive yet in the plot.
No, but we're supposed to think that she is. She verbally brings attention to the fact that she's changing the subject and not going to answer the question. Like, I got from that scene that they're two traumatized individuals who don't want to talk about stuff, but who are making a connection despite that.
But it was so awkwardly done. They're talking.
It is awkward, but I think it was supposed to be awkward.
Well, they did a bad job of it being awkward then, because it didn't feel natural awkward. It felt like two actresses who never had done the scene before got one take to rehearse. They had no chemistry, and Julianne Moore was being given a character that had no way to develop because she had such awkward dialogue that she had to force through.
No, I completely disagree.
Well, you're wrong.
I completely disagree. I really liked it. I thought they were being weird, but that was the point. Like, Julianne Moore was obviously... They were both very traumatized people who were connecting, despite both of them being really awkward and weird. Like, I feel like I've been in that interaction before, and part of it was Amy Adams being, like, desperate for company, or, like, a connection with somebody. I don't know. It worked for me. It was awkward and weird, but I think it was supposed to be. And you were supposed to know that Julianne Moore was suspicious, because she was so suspicious.
There's a difference between being suspicious and being like, hey, I'm not who I say I am. Well, I'm being weird.
That's
what the film was doing.
I know, but I think, and this is a problem with the film, I think that the main mystery of the film is not supposed to be the mystery, which I think they fuck up with the ending of the film. Because for me, what I was getting with the build-up was that the main mystery was not the mystery to this crime. The main mystery was, is any of this happening? So, like, when we saw that scene, I thought Amy Adams was probably making her up. Because, especially with Julianne Moore not saying anything about herself, Amy Adams would have had to make it up about herself if she was making up Julianne Moore's character. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but that only works if Amy Adams made her up. If she made her up, that's a very different ending.
Yeah.
But since she didn't make her up, all of a sudden that scene makes no sense. Because why would this person not say anything about themselves? Not in a suspicious way. They can lie. They can just work around it. They can be organic about it. But this scene is, hey, you're Jane Russell, are you? Why do you say that? Yeah. It's so awkwardly worded, and I'm very disappointed in that scene.
It didn't bother me. It bothered me, but, like, in a good way. I liked it. I thought it was weird.
Okay.
I enjoyed watching it because it was so weird.
I disagree, and I think it hurts the rest of the film. But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I can see your point. I just think that if they're going to do that, they need to pay off that ending. That scene only works.
I think honestly that's a good point, because the ending of this film, I think I'm compartmentalizing the first half of the film from the second half. So in the first half of the film, I like that scene in the context of the first half of the film. But you're right. With the ending, I think the ending sucks, and it ruins everything that happened before.
A big problem with this movie is that the whole time they keep promising you they're building to something.
Yes.
And it does it very well.
Yes.
But you can only build to something if you have an ending that concludes the story.
It reminds me of when, like, TV shows are kind of being lazy and they're trying to build up, like, a big bad, and they're, like, throughout the whole season they're like, this is the biggest bad you've ever seen in your whole life, they're so scary, we're all gonna die from fear the moment we see them, and they build them up so much that they, like, don't have anything when it's time, and it's just, like, some dude, and you're like, that's not scary. It's, like, reminds me of that, where they spend all this time building, and the tension's building, and you're like, wow, this is gonna be mind-blowing, whatever happens, and it's just nothing. It's like they didn't have they didn't have it figured out ahead of time what it was going to be, and they were just like hoping that they would figure it out along the way.
Yes. I feel like that makes sense. It felt like a mystery that didn't have a conclusion in itself before they started writing it, which is weird because it is based, from my understanding, it's based on a book that was already written.
That's interesting.
So I don't know the plot of the book or what the twist ending is. According to Wikipedia, the final part of the book is the same.
Okay.
At least based on what I'm reading right now.
Do you know that the son is younger? Because I know it's quite common in like movies for them to age up characters. I wonder if he's younger in the book.
It doesn't say. He just says he's teenage again. So this might have helped if they had the right casting for that kid. Yeah. Because I think having him be like a Jack Dylan Grazer age.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who Jack Dylan Grazer is?
Not by name.
Okay. Do you know It?
Yes.
You know the nerd?
The nerd. The one with the glasses?
You know who that bass is?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
If they had someone had someone at like Jack Dylan Grazer's age, then we might underestimate them. Yeah. For their weirdness, because their age wouldn't work. And then them being a budding serial killer would be like but they're so young, but then they'd be like, that's why they're a budding serial killer. They're all excited about murder, but they haven't done very much of it yet.
I think also in his evil monologue, he talks about being manipulative, and they make this whole point of him being like, oh, I knew as soon as I saw you, like, the type of person that you would want for, like, you to like me. Like, is that a talent or what? Like, anyways, like a very Joker-esque, like, villain speech. Like, hoo-hoo, I'm so quirky and cool with my murder. But they make this point of showing that he's, like, manipulative, but they never really show him, because, as we said, from the first scene, he's creepy as hell. So it's like, I wish, if he was a little bit younger, at least in, like, casting, because 15-year-olds don't look that old. And then he was charming. Like, he needed to show us that manipulative side, so that we were like, wow, this is a kid who's very small, and he's in, like, this situation that's, like, not good for him, and it's, like, has nothing to do for him, he's just this little child that we need to protect. Then it would have been like a huge twist. But instead we just have him act creepy the whole time, and then at the end he's like, haha, I was creepy the whole time. Yeah, and you're like, yeah, obviously you didn't do a very good job.
It brings up a recent discussion in media that I've been seeing a lot of about casting 20-somethings in teenage roles. Yeah. And there's two ways to cast 20-somethings in teenage roles. If you want just 20-somethings for like a Twilight or a Riverdale situation, where it really, the age is kind of just for the plot's purposes, but it has very little to do with the actors. Yeah. And they don't need to be particularly vulnerable. You can cast a bunch of 20-year-olds. If you want vulnerability and you want that type of nuanced seriousness that this film's going for, you need to cast age appropriate. Yeah. And it's very complicated if you try and get someone who looks older. And who knows? This guy could be like just turned 20. Yeah. And he was probably maybe a teenager when they filmed it, because this film's a few years old. He was going through development hell. So maybe he was a teenager at the time, but he doesn't look it. Yeah. He looks like a 20-year-old, which is fine, but it doesn't help the performance.
Yeah. No, especially when they want us to see him as a kid. Like, they refer to him multiple times as, like, an abused child. So it's like they are obviously verbally, it's kind of, again, show don't tell. They're telling us again. They're like, this is an abused child. He's a little child. Show me somebody who looks vulnerable. And you can even hire adults who look very young. Like that actress from Modern Family who played the teenager. I think she was an adult when they first cast her, but she looked 15. Like, she looked very young. So people who look younger than they are exist. Yeah, it's just bad casting for that character.
I agree. Let's move on to talk about now the middle part of the film, which I'm kind of describing as the mystery time, where Anna Fox, aka Amy Adams, is investigating and looking and Googling and calling.
Yeah.
And then she gets someone who takes a creepy picture of her.
Yeah.
And the film just kind of acts like, wait, I guess that's not a big deal anymore, even though that's like a huge creepy thing.
Yeah.
It was fine. It was fine until the very end when the ending ruins it. But it's generic mystery stuff. I wish she was a bit better at investigating stuff.
So you were arguing before that this was pointless because she never finds anything of use to the mystery. And I was thinking of it as more of like a character thing, in that it was her hyper focusing on something because of her anxiety and her agoraphobia and stuff like that. But thinking about it now with the ending that we have, that it doesn't have anything really to do with whether or not anything she sees is real. They kind of abandon that midway through the film. The unreliableness of her perspective, they kind of like resolve that midway through, which I think is a mistake. So I was seeing that scene in the context of, we don't know if anything weird happened. Like, she's just kind of virtually stalking this family for possibly no reason. But in retrospect, I agree with you that there should have been something more, at least a small hint that pointed towards the sun in that montage, so that, like, even if we didn't understand it then, when the sun is revealed, at least we have something that was like, oh, that related to him. I remember I suggested when she's looking up the husband, because we basically think the husband did it the whole time. Well, we don't, but she does. His assistant from Boston.
Yes.
His assistant from Boston, like, mysteriously died. And so Amy Adams is like, oh, he, like, killed her, obviously. And it turns out the son killed her. I think if the son, and this would, the assistant, and this would go along with him possibly being a little younger, if that was, like, his nanny or something like that, where it would still support the husband having murdered her, because he would obviously be in close contact with her, but it would have a very close connection with the son, and that would make a lot of sense, and I feel like have a lot of impact, that like, he would kill his nanny. Like, that's sort of like a bigger deal, I feel like, than killing your dad's assistant, who, like, doesn't have a huge amount of contact with you. Yeah.
I think if you have a mystery in a film, and it's a type of mystery where the audience is being told, hey, can you solve this?
Yeah.
As this film does. The whole time they're telling you, through how it's being told, the story's being told, this is a mystery that we need to solve together.
Yeah.
So the audience is able to solve it. And because of that, when we spend so much time with her investigating, and then we find out at the end, no, there was no way to solve it. I look back and I think, well, you've wasted a whole bunch of my time, because you were telling me this is a mystery that we should look in together. And then Amy Adams never finds anything that would ever suggest it was the son.
Yeah.
Other than us, the audience, thinking the son was acting creepy.
Yeah.
So I felt like it was a waste of time, and it didn't need to be. If they wanted this to be character development, there was other ways to do it where we weren't wasting our time trying to solve a mystery. And if they wanted it to be solving a mystery, you needed to throw something in there that makes it more clear it could have been the son. It doesn't have to be like a red flag, like, oh, he's attacked people with knives before. It could be something like son suspended for getting in a fight and being like, he's violent. That's all you really needed, but it wasn't there. Or if it was there, we didn't see it.
Yeah.
Which undoes it. But yeah, I was very disappointed in that part too.
So, okay, why don't we talk about the family reveal? So, at this point in the film, the son has come over. Amy Adams has made a very tenuous connection with him, but we're told it's more important than it is. She talks to who she thinks is the wife. She sees her stabbed, but we are very unsure as to if this actually happened or if she just imagined it. She's on drugs, which cause her to hallucinate, and she's drinking at the same time. Extremely unreliable. So we have no idea as an audience if any of this happened. So she reports to the police that she saw this happen, and everyone is very doubtful. She meets the wife, and it's not who she met in real life, so she thinks that this is a big, like, conspiracy. And then at one point, I think it's after, she gets a picture emailed to her of herself. And so that's a confirmation, like, she's kind of doubting herself minorly at this point. That's a confirmation, like, somebody is messing with me. Mm-hmm. So she calls the police again. Everyone is there in her house. She's kind of, like, doing this rant about how she's not crazy. And then we get the reveal with the police being like, your family's dead, over and over again. Because prior to this point, we've seen her on the phone talking to her husband, which I guessed, like, the first time we saw him that he was dead or not real. How did you feel about the reveal and how it was handled and, like, the emotionality of it?
It's not perfect, but it's probably the best part of the movie.
Yes.
In my view. Because it's a mystery that you can solve before, because even if you're like not seeing the husband is weird, it still makes sense, and it contributes to her character element and to the mystery because you can figure it out.
Yeah. The hints are also there in, like, her, when she talks to her husband on the phone, they sound very much, like, in love and good, but then she tells people that they're separated, which doesn't really make any sense. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have, like, hints like that throughout the film where you can, like, guess what's going on.
Yes. I think it was the best part of the movie. I mean, I kind of wish the crash happened for a slightly different reason. I didn't love how it felt. Like her reaching for her phone. Yeah. And I didn't quite see how the crash directly related to her agoraphobia, which the film seems to heavily imply that that's when she got it. Yeah. I think it would have been better if it was something more related to the agoraphobia, just so we could connect the two, instead of her family died in a crash, and so she never leaves the house.
That didn't bother me. I think it's because that's where they were living, and she felt like that's where she didn't want to leave them. Like, she felt like they were in that house, if that makes sense.
I never got that, but okay.
I also like it, but at the same time, I did feel like it could have gone a little deeper. Like, they briefly talk about in the car before the car crash that Amy Adams had, like, cheated, and they were, like, in the midst of breaking up or something when her husband and her child die, which is insanely traumatic. That's a lot. I'm spoilers for Sense8. I'm gonna make a comparison here. In the first season of Sense8, there's a character, Riley, very similar to this character in that there's obviously a lot of trauma. There's obviously something bad that happened, but we don't know what. And there's a very similar, like, flashback scenario that happens. In the episode of Sense8, when we kind of live through what happened to Riley, it is incredibly, like, it's like a gut punch. Like, it just keeps getting worse, and it's very similar to this movie. So, in Sense8, Riley was married, and she was pregnant. She is in labor, and her and her husband are driving to the hospital. They're on, like, snowy mountains, because she lives in Iceland. A car crash happens. They roll down a hill on a mountain. Her husband dies. She's pregnant in the car. She then gives birth in the car next to her dead husband by herself. Then she successfully gives birth. She has her baby. They're still in the middle of a blizzard on a mountain in the snow by herself. She's walking around with her baby, trying to get help. The baby freezes to death in her arms, and then she's finally saved. It's fucking a lot, right? I feel like that was so much better handled than the trauma in this scene, which was like very truncated but very similar. But how it was shown to us in like Sense8 was very much more like emotional, and like it almost felt like you were going through it. Like it just kept getting worse, and you were like, Jesus, like I understand everything that this character has gone through. I understand where they're coming through. I understand their behavior previously when this is what has happened to them. And I felt like while the reveal was good and like well done in comparison to the rest of the movie, it didn't go that extra mile to like really gut punch you and make you be like, poof, like Jesus, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think it could have just been a bit more impactful, like just a little more. I guess we needed more build up to it. Like maybe a scene of them being happy first might have helped.
Yeah.
But
or like something more to do with the cheating, because I feel like that's a big part of why she's so guilty, in that like she fucked up and then they died, and she's like, she says in her suicide tape, like, I'm never going to be able to be forgiven. And I feel like that's part of that, in that she can't be forgiven for cheating on her husband because now he's gone. And so I feel like that needed more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it just needed more. But it was still, despite all our critiques, it was probably still the best scene in the movie, because it had the necessary emotional impacts, and then Amy Adams acting right after.
Yeah.
Where she like realizes how much she's hallucinating.
Yeah.
Helped me believe that she really was hallucinating a lot of this.
Yeah. That's also the twist in the film, where they kind of let go of the narrative that like maybe she's hallucinating, maybe she's not, and Amy Adams just is like, oh, I hallucinated everything. Mm-hmm. And then they don't really bring up the unreliableness of her narrator after that point. Everything we see is assumed to be real after that point.
Yes. So let's talk now about the final part, which is Amy Adams gives up the investigation and she plans to commit suicide by overdose before discovering the photo with the cat and proving that Julianne Moore was real.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand why she was committing suicide. She seemed very not upset with her therapist.
Oh.
She didn't feel guilty when the therapist meeting. She felt relieved she figured this out.
No, I think she was relieved. Okay, so this is a very common thing with suicide, and something you should actually watch out for if you are around somebody or friends with somebody who you know has struggled with this in the past. If somebody's been very depressed and upset, and very, very suddenly they are like elated and they're a lot happier and they seem really relieved, that's often a reaction to having decided that they're going to commit suicide. So that's how I interpreted her relief almost with her therapist, and her almost over accepting of everything was she just decided she wasn't going to deal with it anymore. So that didn't come across strange to me.
Okay. I have no comment on that because I really don't know enough about it, the subject matter, and I don't want to over comment on that particular thing. So let's go to the cat photo. Mm-hmm. How did you feel that was the moment that she figured out that Julianne Moore was real? Because I liked that the photo was it. I didn't think I liked it at first, but I do.
I liked it okay. I wish the photo of her face was a little bit clearer, because, like, honestly, it could have been the actress who was playing the wife. Like, I could not clearly see that was Julianne Moore. So I wish it proved that it happened and that she had met somebody. I wish if we were going to be like 100% certain that was Julianne Moore, it was like a little bit clearer. I also think the interaction she has with David, because David like slept with Julianne Moore, they really tried to make us think David was like a bad person for a while, which was just weak. Like, I feel like they almost over established him as like a pretty good dude with how much he helps her in the beginning, for us to suddenly be like suspicious of him for no particular reason.
It's a very 180 twist where he's helping her with all her outside work. He's helping her with repairs, and then
He's like bringing out the trash for her. Like he's doing very above and beyond things for no particular reason.
and then out of nowhere they're like, he got in a bar fight once and now he's on parole, so he definitely could be the murderer.
I
It's like,
think-
well,
I think maybe what we were supposed to notice is that he takes her knife to help them open boxes, and then like the girl is stabbed with maybe the same knife or something. So maybe that's something we're supposed to know, but they don't really bring up that it was her knife until the very end when the son has the knife and he's like, this is your knife. So there wasn't really a connection with that. And then also his response that he's trying to make extra money was just very reasonable. As like, why would he be colluding with the neighbors who just moved in when he's just some random dude who's in a band, you know? Like, it's much more reasonable that he was just helping them open boxes than that he was like, I don't know, some supervillain.
yeah, I like how they handled David in the end. The twist. Let's talk about the twist. The twist is relevant and a big deal, where we find out the son did it. Ethan reveals to Anna that he murdered Katie, who was Julianne Moore, and he's also killed the secretary, and now he wants to kill Anna.
Well, he said he was just gonna watch her die.
It's still like serial killing.
No, it's still serial killing. It's just, that's important for a point I'm gonna make later. So they reveal that Julianne Moore was real. She was not the wife of the neighbor. She is the birth mother of the son. And she had, what did they say? She like lived in like a meth cult or something weird like that. And we just get the impression she wasn't a very stable person, and she didn't have custody of the son. And we don't really know why he killed her, do we?
I believe they say that she was there following the family because she wanted to.
She obviously loved David from the small interactions we had with her.
David?
Not David, sorry. The son. Who's the son?
She loved Ethan. She made love to David.
Yes.
But yeah.
She obviously cared about Ethan.
She was going to find Ethan. She ran into Amy Adams. They chatted for a bit. And then she slept with David.
Yeah.
And that made her stay around a little longer because she was emotionally distraught when David kind of ended it after the one night stand.
Yeah.
And then that made her more aggressive with Ethan and trying to see Ethan. And then Ethan seems to have stabbed her.
Yeah.
And then what Amy Adams saw was all real then with the stabbing and the death.
Yeah. Which is interesting. You know what I kind of wish instead of the wine glass was that maybe Amy Adams did take a photo, but it was like a really bad photo, and then she could have found like a reflection in the photo or something of like Julianne Moore after she'd been stabbed, or
yeah, I can see that.
I don't know. It just could have been a way they handled it. I think her being the birth mother is fine in terms of like just as an idea, as a plot point, that's fine. But yeah, there's no build up or hints towards that, rather than just Julianne Moore being weird. But like when they tell you it, it's just kind of like, okay. Like it's not like, oh, that's what's going on. You're like, yeah, I guess that could be what happened. That, I guess so, but it's like it's not a very well constructed reveal.
Yes, I would agree with that. Let's talk about the fight scene when Ethan's like trying to stab her and Amy Adams tricks him and smashes the bottle on him. Mm-hmm. I had a problem with how the fight scene in the house. I think it's actually pretty cool because he's still like a young man and she's like a adult, older, like an older in terms of 40s woman who's probably not super physically active.
Yeah.
So she would not be she was not ideal state to fight him. So I liked how she was using weapons and like running in good ways. This is how I would expect her to react.
Yeah.
My issue is the roof.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be like very symbolic for her.
Yes.
Because she has to go outside to survive, even though she hates it.
Yes.
And my problem is that she seemed to have very little issue going outside.
Yes.
Like this should have been a huge thing for her where she's not just fighting Ethan anymore. She is fighting her cell.
Yeah.
And Ethan, where she's freaking out that she's outside and freaking out with Ethan. But she, after like 2 seconds of being like, I'm outside, she's like, okay, gotta go hide now because I'm over it.
No, that's a good point. We even established that she like passes out when she goes outside. It would have even been like better if she ran outside and she like was going to pass out. Like she just was going to, and she had to find a place to like hide. And she like wakes up and he's up there trying to find her or something. Just like, I totally get what you're saying, that there wasn't enough of a struggle for her to overcome that barrier. She was just about to be murdered and then it was fine.
And we've seen her go outside in a crisis before.
Yeah,
because when she runs over, she takes the umbrella and she uses it to run outside. So it might have been interesting if she had to like have the umbrella that was up. She had an umbrella that was up there to go out with, and she had to like hide from the sky while trying to fight Ethan at the same time.
That would have been interesting, and she could have used the umbrella as like a weapon. Ooh, she even could have like, what if she was trying to run outside and she could not do it and she had to like make a detour to get the umbrella? That would have even been like more tension inside. Like she had to like run in a circle to try to get it before she could even run outside. Like that would have been like a really good building of tension, and like something that kind of brought that back from before.
Yes. I just think that they spent so much time being like, she's trapped in this house and then she could never leave it. And then she left it pretty easily. And I'm like, oh. So it was less so that she couldn't leave, and more so, it's hard to leave.
Yeah.
And I understand she's about to be murdered. That's a very good incentive to like
leave,
get over your fear. It's just, she doesn't freak out over it or anything. She just goes outside.
I also felt so bad for David in this scene. After the movie tried to make him be this creepy villain, which I never bought, he literally saves her life and he just dies and we like never talk about him again.
Well, we do talk about him.
Do we?
At the hospital bed, that's the first person she asks about.
Yeah, that's good. But I want to be sad about David. You know, like he really got screwed over by the plot.
I think he got screwed over by the plot. I think by the end we're supposed to know David's kind of an asshole.
Is
but
he?
Like not a bad asshole, just like a kind of a dick.
I guess. I didn't really get that he was an asshole.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, the fight scene was cool. I like that she got actually hurt in the fight scene, because it's like,
I wasn't expecting that.
No.
That was a good. It sounds like callous, but that was like a good injury. That was kind of like not something you see all the time, where it's like shocking and you're like, "Ooh, I wasn't expecting that." So
and
that
it
was
looked like it hurt.
It did, yeah.
And I liked how she defeated him. She wouldn't like overpower him. She kind of tricked him, where she's like, I know he's going to be a little arrogant because he thinks he's a great serial killer. So she got him on weak glass that she knew was not stable, and she got him to fall through it.
Yeah.
That was a clever way to end the fight, and they set it up before in an organic way. So I liked the conclusion of the fight scene. It was a good way to end the fight scene.
Yeah.
Even though, again, it still made no sense that she was just so okay being on the roof.
I agree.
And then the hospital scene with the nice detective, I thought was sweet.
I really liked the nice detective as a character. He again though, I feel like he well, I guess he didn't need to be more of a character, but I think it would have been nice if he was more of a character.
He was good. I liked him. I didn't need more of him. I thought we had enough of him. We established that he was sympathetic to Amy Adams' circumstance, and he
Which I do think there is a big talk of privilege and how he treats her specifically, because I feel like the only reason he knows what she's been through is because he talked to her therapist. And I feel like the only reason that extra step to understand where she was coming from was kind of because she was in this multi-million-dollar house in the middle of Manhattan, and it was like, why is this lady in particular being insane? Whereas I feel like a lot of people wouldn't have gotten that extra thing. Which, speaking of, talking to her therapist, why was her therapist telling the police anything?
I assume it was the fact that she was endangering herself, so the therapist was allowed to disclose that. Or
Probably.
Maybe she's given permission to tell this sort of thing in circumstances.
Maybe.
That didn't bother me that much because I just presumed it was a reason that didn't matter and it would have taken time to describe. The horrible thing in that scene is her injury makeup looked awful.
That didn't bother me.
It looked so bad. It was some of the worst injured makeup ever. It was just some purple eyeshadow that drooped down onto her cheek. It was terrible. It distracted me so much because they can do so much better. I was genuinely appalled by the makeup, and I don't normally care about makeup and stuff, but like it was unacceptable for me. And that's the conclusion. She moves out of her house 9 months later.
Which, again, I feel like the solution to trauma is not really more trauma.
Questionable moral, perhaps. Yeah. But I got the idea that she, like, because she had to go through more trauma and she overcame it, she could overcome her agoraphobia, and so she was ready to leave the house and, like, leave all that behind. So I got that. And I liked it. I liked the final scene. Like, it was where I expected the story to end, and then it ended. So yeah. I think, any final concluding thoughts?
I think that this movie obviously had high expectations of itself, and I think it could have followed through on those. Like, it had the ingredients it needed. If the son had been younger, more vulnerable, and more manipulative, him and Amy Adams needed to have a closer relationship. And in the final monologue, he talks about how he was originally just planning to watch her die because when he met her, he knew she was like a vulnerable person. If we had seen him being manipulative in their reactions and like steadily encouraging her towards that outcome, and then in retrospect when it was revealed we had that like moment that recontextualized their previous interactions, I think that could have been really interesting and been a much more satisfying like reveal at the end. I wonder if the book did any of that.
I didn't read the book, and I only plan to read the book based on this film. But I'm sure the book's better, because the book was a big success, and they instantly wanted to make it into a movie.
I can see that, because if they had more interaction, then the twist definitely would have been more impactful.
So yeah, I guess that concludes our discussion of The Woman in the Window. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We'll see you next time by the campfire.